Every high mountain shall be made low, and every valley shall be filled in to prepare the way of the Lord, that we may advance in security. And how might that practically look like in our own lives? Well, I was meditating on this with my seminarians this morning, and we're thinking about human formation and spiritual and so on. I said, well, maybe part of raising up the valley is getting into a good exercise routine. So rather than doing nothing, we exercise 4 or 5 days a week. Maybe bringing the high mountain down is saying we don't have to spend 15 hours a week on videos, video games, or unnecessary web surfing. Maybe bringing the valley up is forgiving people who have hurt us and releasing that. Or maybe the bringing the mountains low is coming to God for mercy for our own sins. Maybe it's raising up our academic struggle and saying, despite my ADD, I'm going to give it my all. Or maybe it's saying, I need to let go of some of my intellectual pride or hubris and be a bit more humble. So there are a lot of things, I think, human and spiritual, which we could examine in our own lives. What needs to be brought low, what needs to be raised up. John the Baptist goes into the desert. Well, technically, the Hebrew and the Greek, desert could be predicated in two different ways. Number one, it could be said this way. John went into the desert proclaiming, prepare the way of the Lord. Or it could be said, John proclaimed, go in the desert to prepare the way of the Lord. You see the difference? It could be John went into the desert where he said it, or John could be telling us, you go into the desert. Sometimes we have to go in the desert to prepare the way of the Lord. Advent is said to be a little Lent, a kind of journey that has some self-sacrifice. We should have some acts of self-denial in this season, meaning, are we fasting at all? Are we giving alms? Are we sacrificing in some measure in acts of charity? It's kind of like a little Lent. And when we grow the most seems to be in those kind of desert moments, when we're challenged, when it's dry. We don't have the same exact self-support system. We need God. And the Lord brings to life that which is in the desert. But John was also a hero, and this is my own meditation, thinking about it for my own life too, as I've also been looking at the life of St. Maximilian Kolbe. But John was called to go into the desert. He could have sat alongside the Sea of Galilee in a nice, plush, green place. He could have gone to fruitful olive groves or plantations. But he went into the desert. And the desert was typically a place where spirits, demonic spirits, festered, and where it was lifeless, and it was purging, painful. And one felt a kind of aloneness because people don't dwell in the desert. And so it was a place of testing. And John the Baptist was called to the desert. And I think there's something heroic about his response. When I look at the life of St. Maximilian Kolbe and what happened to him. Now, Maximilian Kolbe from Poland grew up in a family that had a strong devotion to Mary. They prayed the rosary a lot. And he had, as a young man, began to think about vocation to the priesthood. He had a severe injury on his right thumb, and it was to be amputated when he was age 20. Now, one of the difficult things about that is, if you're looking to be a priest, especially prior to Vatican II, These digits, these two fingers and this thumb, are so important because it's through this that the priest holds up the consecrated host. And Maximilian knew, if I have my thumb amputated, I need to have a special dispensation. I'm not sure I'm going to get it. So someone brought him water from Lourdes, where allegedly the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared. And that water was put to his thumb and it was miraculously healed. Now Mary appeared to him as a child and held out to him two crowns. One was red and one was white. One was red for martyrdom and the white was for virginity. And she said, "Which one would you like?" And as a young boy he said, "I'd like both." So now years later he's in Auschwitz. Someone escaped, a prisoner, and when that happened the Gestapo would choose 10 to die in their place. And one of the 10's name was Francis. He was a sergeant. And when Francis was chosen, he started crying and weeping, saying, "I have a wife, I have children. I want to see them." So Maximilian went forward to devote his life instead and said to the Gestapo, "I will take his place." And they put him in an underground starvation chamber which had no light, a very cold cement floor and one pail in the corner. It was full of stench. And he led the other 9 men singing praise songs for days while they were starving to death. He and 3 others lasted into the 3rd week until finally the Gestapo wanted them dead, so they injected them with carbolic acid. What I think is something beautiful and profound, inspiring for me about Maximilian as John the Baptist, somebody had to go into the dark desert. They were called to be heroic as martyrs. And in our own today's world, there's a lot of darkness. And some people are going to be called to be martyrs. Many already are. Those people, God will give the courage to do that. So when God says to them, "Go into the desert," their life given is going to break the yoke of evil power in the world. Back to our own lives. The mountain needs to be made low, and the valleys need to be filled in. How does God want to orchestrate that for you? How are you called to respond?